The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. Reminder to all of you to smash the like button and sub to the channel. Download the audio podcast as well. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I want to welcome into the show the 2008 Pat Mayo Experience Golf Award winner for most dominating performance of the year for his victory at the John Deere Classic, Michael Kim. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Pat.
I have to ask you about the John Deere Classic for one thing. When you just ran a train over everyone that week, did you feel like you had it going into the week? Like, how is it that, that was, like I said, the most dominating performance of that year in any tournament? Is it just everything clicked for the 3 days and you could coast in the final round?
I just caught lightning in a bottle that week. Did I know heading into the week? Absolutely not. I was coming off of maybe like 5 missed cuts in a row or something. So I was just grasping at straws at that point. But somehow, some way, I was able to, like I said, catch lightning in a bottle and win by 8.
It was crazy. And it got you into the Open Championship and the Masters too, didn't it?
Yes. Played Carnoustie the week after, got on the charter plane. So that was really exciting. And like you said, got me into the Masters in 2019. Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of people have problems with the Masters the first time they play it. I guess that's because of the undulation, the greens, or is it just the emotional moment of when people play the Masters for the first time? It's like a really big deal, and maybe you don't have all your facilities with you. Like, what is it about first timers that they seem to struggle at the Masters?
I think there's a few things. Like you said, it's the golf course itself. It's really tricky. But at the same time, you feel like you know all the shots going in, just because you've watched it on TV so much. I think just from a golf course wise, the biggest difference was how fast the greens got from Wednesday to Thursday. Like usually, even on the PGA Tour, they might get a little faster, but at Augusta, it was like a big noticeable difference between Wednesday and Thursday. So that was different. And that first tee shot, I was just a nervous wreck. I wasn't sure if I was going to get the ball on the tee. You kind of pinch yourself wondering if this is real and whether you're actually playing in the Masters. So those two are probably the biggest factors of it all.
So you got the PGA Tour win, you got your card, then you went down, you played Corn Ferry and got yourself back up. You retain your card this year, and it seems like you seem far more laissez-faire now. I mean, we actually get to know you online a little bit more than maybe we did 6 years ago. Why the change to swing instruction? Is it trying to get some of that glorious money at the end of the year? You saw the Max Homa model, and maybe you could get yourself inside the top 10 with a lot of people leaving, or do you just genuinely like to do it?
I think, for one, it has nothing to do with the PIP. Like, I think there's a lot of people that think I'm doing this for the PIP, but the PIP isn't really a social media award. It's more of a FedEx Cup and how much are you on TV award or prize. But Max was certainly a big factor in it. When I played with him about a year and a half ago at the Safeway. It was certainly an eye-opener that how much of a following that he had at that point. And, the swing instruction stuff kind of came of, what kind of content am I going to put out there on Twitter? And through my ups and downs, I had seen a lot of different coaches and felt like I had a much better understanding of golf and the full swing. And, I figured that would be my kind of lane, I guess.
Have you noticed that the crowds are like you have bigger crowds now because of it? Because your online presence has been pretty big. It's probably the biggest growing one amongst most people on tour right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I have crowds. I would say if there is a crowd kind of walking by and they see my name on my back, they'll be like, oh yeah, like, hey, I really like what you're doing on Twitter. And it's kind of more like that. But slowly and surely, it's it's definitely growing, which is cool to see.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the pro-ams because I saw you put out about different paces of play, like what you should do as an amateur if you're paired up with a professional. Is there a certain mindset that you have to have as a professional when you play in one of these pro-ams? And is that why we saw a lot of people duck Pebble Beach and the American Express over the years?
There, it can be kind of a distraction if you let it. We're all creatures of habit, and we're used to playing PGA Tour events with other PGA Tour pros that you don't have to really worry about. When you play with AMs that aren't the best golfers, it's definitely something you have to kind of keep in mind. You'll probably get an AM or a caddy stepping on your line once in a while. So those things have been a bit of a deterrent for some guys, but I've actually enjoyed playing with the AMs, getting to know really successful people in the business world. That was always interesting, and always interesting to have conversations with those kind of people.
Where they don't change the pins for any of the AM rounds before you get to the final round. So the 3 rounds of the American Express, now the 2 rounds at Pebble. We'll see if it goes back to the 3-course rotation in future years. Is there any sort of advantage to playing the harder course last after 2 groups full days have played it? Or is that just something in my mind where I'm like, yeah, maybe you can kind of look at the green and be like, or you can take a look at TV and be like, well, if the pin is there and I hit the ball here, I know where this breaks now.
you know, it's not as much of a difference, I would say. We get the pin sheet the day before of all the greens and pin locations, so we already know where it is going into it. Certainly, I have felt like I've watched TV on certain holes where I'm like, oh wow, that putt looked like a break, and I might kind of keep a mental note of it. But I don't think it's a huge difference, and the greens, the greenskeepers do a fantastic job of making sure it's not too beat up by the time we get there. Although certain times there have been certain courses where if it just rains, like it's going to be in worse shape, but that's the same at every round. So it is what it is, and you just deal with it.
So when you go into a week and you're trying to prepare, and even to take something like one of the big talking points that we've been seeing about Pebble Beach this week is just how awful the weather is going to be. It looks like it's going to rain every day. There's wind gusts up to 60 on Sunday, which means it's probably pretty unplayable. Like, when you're preparing for a tournament, knowing that there's probably going to be delays, you have no idea when this is going to end, whether they might try to condense rounds into one day to try to get it done. Does that change your preparation at all?
I think it might change on, if it's that windy, I'm certainly going to practice more, shots that are, I'm going to try to hit low, or take yards off, maybe even a couple like bunt 7-irons for the 6th hole at Pebble, because you never know what iron you're going to hit off that tee. And, like, because I'm not playing the event, I'm just kind of like, I hope it blows 60 and they don't stop it. I'm just kind of a regular fan now.
So is that what happens in the weeks that you're not playing? You're just like us watching it on TV being like, yeah, let's see as much carnage as possible.
100%, 100%. I'm kind of like, I am excited for the rain. I'm excited for the wind. Whereas if I was playing, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's gonna happen, or I better make sure I have this plan, or practice this. But now as a fan, I'm just kind of like, I hope there's a hurricane and they have to play through it.
So for us on this show, we generally talk about, betting. We talk about different markets, daily fantasy, the DraftKings pricing. And it does seem, and this has happened in a lot of sports, where daily fantasy has actually allowed more of the populace, or at least the engaged populace, to know about the names that aren't just the big 3 names in the field, because you need to know the back end of this. So have you seen, basically, since DraftKings betting has become legalized, that there is a more engaged fan for a different set of players now? It's not just, hey, there's Rory, let's go follow around Rory. Like, more fans know more players now?
On site, it's still the big name guys are certainly the biggest crowds and all that. On my Twitter mentions, I'll get some comments like, oh, you helped me win this, or you helped me lose that. I notice it more online than I do in person. But certainly I understand exactly what you're saying, and that I think in the daily sports betting, you don't exactly want to bet on the most popular players, right? I think that's kind of the gig.
Yeah, you want to try to find the guys who might have the longer odds, who can end up at the top of the leaderboard. Like anyone who took you with the American Express, you come in sixth. And people are like, "This is fantastic." You needed to have Michael Kim on your fantasy roster, or you weren't going to win that week. Because as it turned out, no one had Nick Dunlap. What's that like being at a tournament where this guy that basically even us in like the betting world who know everyone in the field weren't super familiar with, 20 years old, an amateur. Well, obviously, you want to win the tournament. Everyone who's playing wants to win the tournament, but it's a weird piece of history to be around, isn't it?
Yeah. When we're playing it, we're all competitors. We're all, we all start from zero. We are trying to do our best and win the tournament. But certainly on Sunday, I was looking at the leaderboard, not to, see where I was at, but to see how Nick would handle the pressure and whether how well he would play. And I remember maybe I was on 10 or 11 and he had started to kind of come down to earth a little bit. And I think even Sam took the lead at one point. And so I think, in my group, we were kind of like, oh, maybe he might not be able to pull it off. But then to come back and beat Sam and beat, Justin Thomas in the same group to win the PGA Tour event was incredible and an amazing accomplishment.
So one thing that I've been beating the drum for a really long time, to what I would think would help more engagement for the fans for the PGA Tour, would be almost like a red zone for golf on the cut line. So if you just put cameras on 17 and 18 and 8 and 9 on Friday, you could have all of the players finishing their rounds and people could actually talk about the cut line. And I mean, how outside of the end of a tournament, where does the most drama really lie in a golf tournament? It's the guys trying to play the weekend, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. As a guy that had missed a ton of cuts in like a 2-year stretch where I was playing bad, I wasn't really thinking about trying to win. I was just trying to make some cuts and get some momentum. And, and even now, like earlier this year at the Sony Open, Joel Damon missed a pretty like a 3.5 foot putt to let, 10 more guys in. And, I'm sure someone finished like top 20 just because of that. And we all owe Joel a dinner or a beer or something. So that is definitely a interesting storyline on Friday that only golf provides.
Yeah, and it's one of these things where, especially with betting and daily fantasy, that you want to see a lot of the players that just TV doesn't typically show. Like the amount of shots that you see on a PGA Tour broadcast, especially on Golf Channel in the early rounds, is outrageously low. You might get like 3 shots before a commercial break, and it's always the same people going over and over. Now that looks like there's investment, do you think, I mean, you got to pay the players a certain amount. Obviously, there's sponsor money that needs to go towards making the purses bigger, creating the venues. How much do you think might actually go into infrastructure for the TV product to allow, like if I bet on Michael Kim, could I see every shot that Michael Kim has? That's probably not going to happen in my lifetime, it feels like. And it seems like they have it for the Players' Championship. Why is it so difficult, do you think, for the broadcast to be able to show exactly what certain people want to see?
It's just, I think it's just time and money, right? It's just hard. Golf courses are really big. You only have a certain amount of time allotted to show. And, most guys want to see Rory McIlroy or Scotty Scheffler or whoever the big guys, and those are kind of the low-hanging fruits. But I think you've seen like in the Players and at the Masters where you can see every single shot that every player has hit, which was really cool. So hopefully in the future we can use the investment and the money coming in to better, not only, from my perspective as a player playing in the events, but certainly the fan perspective as well.
So you get your win, you hold your tour card, and then you mentioned you missed a bunch of cuts over the course of like 2 years. What changed to get you back to where you're at now?
For the most part, I have to give a ton of credit to my coach now, Sean Foley. Funny enough, he was one of the last coaches I called, just because I thought what he was going to tell me was not going to fit me. But it actually he was actually the best coach for me. And 2.5 years ago, I went to see him, and ever since then, things had been kind of on the up and up.
Yeah, I mean, how much in terms of driving distance do you think you've gained over the past 4 years?
I want to say it's close to 20 yards. That wasn't like intended, but as I kind of did my stuff in the gym and worked with Sean, it kind of just happened naturally. And it certainly wasn't like I wasn't planning on trying to gain, I want to gain 20 yards and so I can play better and stuff. But as I got more comfortable, as I got stronger, the distance came a bit more naturally.
And has that? I mean, it's funny when you see kind of the correlation. Like I'm looking at all of your stats right now, tournament over tournament, and that the ones where you actually gain a bunch of strokes driving and off the tee, it kind of facilitates how good you do with your irons as well. Is that because you're able to put yourself out a little bit longer, hit shorter clubs in, and then you can be more precise?
It's all those, yeah. But the driver was the biggest issue when I was struggling. So, the driver has become a really big key for me, where if I feel good with the driver, I know everything else is gonna settle in nicely. And so, like you said, tournaments where I've driven it well, I know my swing is in a good spot, and I feel very comfortable on any golf course.
Have you used any like advanced analytics to try to look at trying to how to tackle a course? Because I've talked to a few people where that's been the case for them, and even someone like I think Bryson had a team of guys trying to like go out and scout a course. Is there anything that you try to look at before you go into a tournament, other than like, hey, of course, like when you play your practice rounds, you make your mental notes of, hey, if I'm going to miss, I want to miss here to make sure that I don't leave myself with a giant number. But I remember there used to be a big article, probably came out like 15 years ago, about number 10 at Riviera, about where the pin location was on that green should have dictated what you should do off the tee, either going for it or laying up completely. And it would kind of factor in of what's the birdie percentage, what's the double bogey percentage, depending on how aggressive you wanted to get. But it was all predicated on where the pin placement was that day. I was always very fascinated by something like that, but I was wondering that, is there a service that players can use? Do you have your own people to do things like that? Or is that just guy who doesn't play professionally really overthinking it?
No, you're not overthinking it at all. I have a stats guy, Austin Powell. He sends me a pretty detailed course strategy scouting report before the week. He'll show me, like you said, different scoring averages on different pin locations. And, he uses the shot length data over past few years on the golf course, if they have it, and kind of gives me a pretty detailed breakdown of how I should attack this certain hole. I would say pin locations don't make a massive difference in my strategy on off the tee. It makes a difference, obviously, kind of heading into the green. But for the most part, he gives me a pretty detailed report on what based on comfort and how I feel, this is the statistical best play for you.
Do you think that since you've started to do that, that it has really benefited your game?
It certainly has taken a lot of kind of questions out when I play golf. I mean, a lot of times the advice is hit driver and get more aggressive off the tee anyway. So, when if I'm kind of undecided on, whether it's driver or maybe it's lay back a little bit, I can kind of see his scouting report and kind of, yeah, this is the numbers play and probably what I should do.
Well, we have a lot of discussions, like, 'cause people will make up any sort of reason to bet on or not bet on any sort of golfer going into the week. But there are certain courses that have kind of proven itself out that the more you play them, the better you get at them. Although it doesn't seem to be the case for a lot of them. Are there certain courses that you just show up to, you're like, oh, I know how to play this course. I've always played well at this course. I'm gonna play really well at this course. Or is that maybe it's not even how it sets up for your game. Maybe it's just you're comfortable there rather than a different place. Because I know you said you grew up in the like San Diego area. You've played Torrey Pines a bunch of times, but like looking at how you play, like that seems to be a tougher course for you because you don't hit the ball potentially 350 yards off the tee.
Yeah, for professional golfers, like a comfort is like a huge thing, right? Golf is so mental, and if you're not that comfortable, it's going to be much harder for you to perform. And there are certain courses where the design just suits you much better. It could be maybe like a ball flight thing. Certain courses like Nicholas designs, you probably want to be a fader on those courses, and certain courses where a draw might be better. But at the end of the day, more than anything, it's how your game is at that point. It could be as comfortable as you could be, but if the ball's going crooked, it's still going to go crooked. So it's just like a bunch of different factors, but comfort and kind of how the course suits your eye is definitely a big factor.
Like, do you have a preference between longer courses, shorter courses? Like, I always try to think of, like, I always try to make some sort of comps in my mind because it does seem field strength, skill set of player just based on raw statistics. There are certain players that do well at what I call like the Pete Dye and friend swing. So like the Sony Open, Colonial, all the Pete Dye courses, even the American Express. Like it seems like those courses demand very similar skill sets, or they're not just ones that the longest players can simply just go overpower, so it brings the entire field into play. Would I be right saying that?
I certainly think so. I mean, I think you see certain guys do really well at certain courses like Harbor Town, or Colonial. I used to think that I was better suited for the shorter, tighter golf courses, especially earlier in my career when I used to hit it really short. Um, but now, over the last couple years, I think I've done better. Like I did really well at Quail Hollow, and that's a golf course that, I could have never imagined playing well there early in my career. That every hole is like 600 yards. And there seems like a bunker at 320 that Rory can cover, but my ball finds every time. But last year I played well there. So maybe, I've certainly have much more of an open mind to what golf courses suits me now. But there is certainly like an overall, certain courses fit you for sure.
Yeah, and I guess your strategy would have to change on that. Like when you play Quail Hollow, like you're going to have to hit driver basically every time. Is that the case at Harbor Town or Sony?
I think those courses you can hit driver. Most choose not to, which kind of brings a lot of shorter players into the field. Like I remember my caddy Heath Holt. He's been out there since the late 90s, and he told me one year at Harbor Town the fairways were running so rock hard, and Brian Gay, who's like the straightest hitter out there at that time, won by like 8 shots or some outrageous number just because he was the only one capable of hitting fairway after fairway.
All right, that's super interesting. And just even to look at your results, like your top end results last year, it's just the crazy, like Wyndham and Colonial, a fifth and a sixth. I mean, I'd put those courses into a bucket as the shorter ones. But you said you had the T7 at Quail Hollow. Then you were fifth in Puerto Rico. Like the Puerto Rico course is pretty long too, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty long. I would say yardage wise, it's not long, but a lot of those holes are really into the wind, and the fairway just the paspalum grass just doesn't roll much. So it plays longer than the score, I would say, yardage wise.
Is there a like we always try to break everything into splits. Like this guy putts well on Poa or Paspalum or Bent or Bermuda. Are those legitimate things? Like guys have a preference for the putting surface?
I would say Poa, I don't know if there's like a massive difference, but certainly like Bermuda, like I feel like certain guys that grew up on Bermuda are just way better at putting on those greens. Like I grew up on the West Coast, so I never saw Bermuda growing up unless I went to a, like an event in the South. So I still am a little uncomfortable at times when I see like a lot of grain, and I don't know because grain is so picky. Like you just sometimes it takes it, sometimes it doesn't. But not saying like I haven't putted well on those greens, but certainly the guys from the South are way more comfortable on those types of greens. I don't know if it actually shows up in the stats, but they certainly look more comfortable.
Yeah, we've seen that over time. Like there are certain players from certain regions. It's like players from Texas tend to play really well in the wind just because that's what they're used to and that's how they played growing up.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, guys like Jordan and Scotty, they're really good at flying the ball. They know exactly what to do in the wind. Me, I'm from San Diego, so I like perfect, clear, 70-degree weather conditions.
Besides the grain on like, let's say on Bermuda, like Paspalum really sticks out to me. And that you don't have a lot of shot length data from any of these courses, so it's really tough to gauge. But you do see a lot of the same players pop up at Corrales in Puerto Rico. We even saw it in Cabo earlier this year with the new venue. It used to be kind of the same at Mayakoba, but that field used to be a little bit stronger. Is it that? Because we always try to figure out, like, hey, these guys are amazing tee to green. Like, Luke List is the prime example of this. It's like, here's a guy who's essentially Rory tee to green and misses every 2-foot putt. And the week that he putts well, he's going to win. So we always try to find those guys because they're the prime ones to bet at huge odds so they can find this putter they're going to do well. And it does seem like on Paspalum, the good putters and the bad putters, that gap closes between them. I assume it's because the greens are so slow?
That's definitely a factor. For whatever reason, like those courses on at Puerto Rico, especially, at like Mayakoba or even Dominican, more so than the speed, the greens themselves aren't like crazy undulated. There's a lot of, if you kind of look at like from an 8 point percentage perspective, there's a lot of 1%, 2%. There's not a lot of 3%. I think it's because those courses were designed for resort play and for, the normal amateur to enjoy. So, the greens are just a little flatter. And like you said, because of the slower green speed, the putts just don't break as much, and you can just kind of hit most putts, especially the shorter ones, like right center, left center, right edge. You rarely have to play them outside the hole and kind of dive into the hole. You can just kind of play it inside the hole and bang it in.
One of my favorite things that you've been doing on Twitter is giving us a course preview from your perspective of some of the courses that you've been playing. It's really, really helpful when we're trying to break down tournaments and figure things out. So I know you're playing in Phoenix this year. What would you like when you're prepping for Scottsdale? Are there any other courses where you kind of show up, like obviously there's a ton of desert, but like, is it anything like Amex? It doesn't seem that way.
I think when I think of a course like TPC Scottsdale, like you said, for me, the driver is the most key thing. If I'm driving it well, I know I'm good. So in my mind, I'm always kind of looking for the certain more difficult tee shots, like 11, water up the left and cactus on the right. 13 is the water on the right, par 5, and cactus on the left. I think Scottsdale, there's a lot of trouble on the left side, I would say, at least on the back nine, like 11, 17 and 18 even. So, if I'm prepping for that week, like for this week, I would try and kind of keep those tee shots in mind. Okay, what shot, what kind of shape, what kind of shot am I going to hit with the driver to better my chances at the tournament?
Yeah. Do you think you're going to go play in the Mexico Open this year?
at Vedanta.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will be there. Yeah.
Yeah, you played it last year. What did you make of that course? Because one thing that I kind of noticed, I was just trying to, because we don't have a ton of information on it. There's no shot link data, but I did notice a lot of the guys that were up there on the Torrey Pines leaderboard who had played in Mexico, like they were very similar names. Is it just a bomb and gouge type place?
The fairways are really generous. You know, it's kind of funny. You play the first hole and it's like a really hard driving hole. There's water all the way down the right. It's a big dogleg right. There's a little bit of OB on the left, but it's pretty far left. But either way, it's a pretty narrow driving hole. And from that point on, you can hit it anywhere, it seems like. And the rough wasn't too long. So that's probably where you kind of see the bombers. Like I think Tony won last year, and I played with John last year. John Rahm doesn't count since he plays well everywhere. But yeah, certainly there's a lot of room off the tee. There's a couple par fives where only the real bombers can reach. So I think that's why you might see a correlation between Torrey and Mexico.
And does that kind of go with this? I mean, the Pass Palom greens, I assume that it is it a resort course? Like, is it an easier putting course?
Yeah, I would say that definitely falls into an easier putting course. It got windy a couple times last year, which can kind of dictate the score a little bit, but off the tee, it's pretty wide, and it's more about the second shots and probably the putting coming in.
What is it with Torrey Pines South, Pebble Beach, and Riviera with the massive amount of short putts that are missed? Is it the undulation in the green? Is it the weird speed? Is it the putting surfaces themselves on the Poa grass? Like it's crazy to me that those three courses are the lowest makes inside five feet.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with the Poa grass, I would have to say. Those Riv, Torrey South, and Pebble, they tend to get pretty bumpy, and especially in the afternoon. And it's Riv can get kind of firm, but Pebble is rarely firm, especially when we play it. So the spike marks add up, and especially at Torrey and Pebble, like the fields are pretty big, so there's just more people stepping on the greens. The bumpier they get, I missed a couple just absolute short ones that just there were ones where I would just kind of go in and kind of one foot over the other and just kind of quickly tap in, but they just would hit a bump and lip out. So it is what it is that week, and the Poa and the bumpiness of the greens is probably why you see so many short putts missed.
Yeah, it's funny because like even to look at who the best Poa putters on average are on tour, you're one of them. So I would guess that there is a skill to kind of know those things.
I think it's I grew up on them, so I'm used to the bump. There's no like technique or anything. I just feel comfortable. I'm much better at accepting those bumps and the short putts, as opposed to certain guys that grew up on Bermuda greens where they are kind of more used to more manicured greens where if they feel like on a short putt, like if you hit the putt that you should make, but sometimes at Torrey and at Pebble that just doesn't happen. And I'm just more used to it, and I just kind of accept it and move on and not let it bother me for the next short putts. Because once the doubts start creeping in on those putting greens, it can get really difficult.
That's really interesting. Yeah, you don't go on tilt after missing a 3-footer that you feel good that you're going to hit your next 3-footer where other guys just might spiral.
Exactly.
All right. Well, the other thing that I wanted to ask you is about the Aon rewards and getting into elevated events. Like how much of what you're picking for your schedule for what you're allowed to pick is going to be geared around trying to get into the top 5 of a swing to get into these elevated events? And do you think that this is a good thing for the tour to make it a bit more competitive with, like I know the NBA tried its in-season tournament that drew a little bit of stuff. They have the FA Cup in soccer where I don't think it's been well explained to the viewers all that much of, who are these top 5 guys, and like, why are they competing so hard over these 4 events? But did you make a conscious effort to try to play in some of these events so you can get into the signature events?
To be fair, I feel like I don't have a completely good grasp on the Aeon 5 either, so I wouldn't feel left out. You know, the answer is always play better, and you'll be in if you do. So, other than that, it's I was talking to a lot of the, as you do, you talk with your playing partners, and it's funny. I feel like back in the day, your schedule could differ a decent amount depending on which tournaments you liked. But now everyone, if you're not in the signature events, you just take those as natural breaks, and everyone else is playing in the other events. There's not a whole lot of there's not a whole lot of difference between my schedule and another guy that's not in a signature event schedule, if that makes sense. And so we're just playing mostly all that we can, and do as well as we can during those events, and hopefully we can get into a future signature event.
So does that mean, like you said, you're going to play in Mexico? I assume that means the next week you'll go play at PGA National. Then you have a signature event. You're in the Players, but even coming out of the Players to try to get into other signature events or even the Masters, that you're probably playing a month straight after the Players, right?
Yeah, exactly. The only one that I'm considering taking off is Puerto Rico, just because if I play Puerto Rico, I think that's like 7 or 8 in a row that I might play. And usually I try and cap it as at 3 or 4 tournaments in a row. Because otherwise you just start losing energy, and it's just tougher on your body. But like I said, everyone that's not in signature events have basically the same schedule.
Yeah. Well, is it interesting competing against the same guys all the time, or did you like the variance of, well, Scotty's going to show up at this tournament, and then it's, a few other of the guys that might be playing in the signature events that are going to come down, where it does seem like a lot of these events are going to be the same 120-ish people with, plus or minus 20 coming in and out.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make a huge difference to me, whether I'm competing against, I don't know. I played with Maverick McNeely at Amex, so his name comes to mind, but him over Joseph Bramlett or anything like that. But it is interesting to see how the schedules kind of line up, and how much. I don't know how much of the top 50 guys we'll see in the other events. So it'll be interesting for sure. And with all these changes coming up, with the deal with the sports group and possibly the PIF coming up, like I've kind of looked at it like, all this could change very quickly, even in 2025 or 2026. So we'll see how it plays out, but I feel like things are going to change anyway. So it's not that important for me to get too wrapped up in all these schedule related things.
Yeah, you can only control what you know, and if you don't know, just trying to control it becomes a fool's errand. It just causes you stress. So why even try to think about that sort of stuff? Have you seen any of the new, like, young up-and-comer guys from the Corn Ferry Tour or the collegiate level, and like, are these guys like legit good?
I know Jake Knapp, just from my junior golf days. I know Norman Jong. Who else am I? I've just because I spent a couple years, or not a couple years, but just because I spent a year on the Corn Ferry Tour 2 years ago, I feel like I actually played some rounds with them. It seems like they all hit it really far, which is great for golf these days, for a scoring aspect. We'll see. A lot of times, if you're inside the if you got your card through a Corn Ferry Tour, it probably means you're good enough to keep your PGA Tour card or get inside the top 125. It just has to do with how quickly can you get comfortable playing PGA Tour events, and you really need to get a good start so you don't get stuck behind, in the reshuffle category. But once those guys feel comfortable and they get a couple good starts early in the year, that they tend to be really good throughout the rest of the year.
What's the main difference between playing on the Korn Ferry Tour and the PGA Tour in terms of how the courses are set up? Is it set up for more of a birdie fest on the Korn Ferry Tour versus some of the more difficult events on the PGA Tour?
The setup wise, like pin, the only thing you can really control, I feel like, are pin locations, and the pin locations are I would say pretty close to like what they would do on PGA Tour. It's just the golf courses themselves. Like you never see like a Torrey Pine South or a Riviera or a trying to think of kind of your difficult courses like Quail Hollow. You just don't see a lot of those. Most of the courses they play at Korn Ferry events are more along the lines of like La Quinta Country Club or Nicholas. We're just the courses themselves don't ask a ton out of your game, like certain courses like Torrey or Quail do. Setup wise, they're kind of handcuffed by the courses themselves. They just play at easier courses for the most part.
Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time, Michael. Thank you for coming on and chatting with me.
No, thanks for having me.
Next time you have a break in your schedule, we'd love to have you back. I mean, just even some of this course insight on Mexico, Puerto Rico, Corrales. Like this is the stuff. This is the stuff that we're looking for on the show here.
I'm happy to give my insights. I don't know how much you want to trust my insight, but that is up to you and your listeners, I guess.
Yeah, of course. Well, we will all be rooting for you, so we're all probably just going to bet on you to win tournaments now. And we are going to take credit that because you came on the show, this was the boost that you needed to get back over the top. You'll get yourself into the Masters, all the signature events, and it'll be glorious. You probably will never want to come back on the show after that when you're when you're the biggest time of all, but we'll be happy for you.
If I win this season, I promise I will be back to get that boost back again.
Well, if people haven't done it yet, go follow Michael Kim on Twitter. He's the best Twitter follow of any of the professional golfers. So if you're not doing that already, go do it right now. You can follow me at the PME. As I mentioned before, smash like to the episode, sub to the channel, and sub to the audio podcast as well. I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!